When I bought my land 5 years ago, I thought I was buying peace, space, sanity. It was tucked just far enough from Denver to avoid the chaos, but close enough to civilization that I could still get a good cup of coffee and high-speed internet. I'm an architect by trade, but what I built there wasn't just a house. It was mine in every sense of the word. I picked every beam, every inch of stone, every damned screw that held that place together. The land was properly surveyed, staked, fenced, and registered. I had the legal footprint and the blisters to prove it. It was more than property. It was proof of patience in a world where everyone wanted everything fast. My nearest neighbor was technically the forest, until, of course, Richard Mueller arrived. I first noticed the old rust-colored SUV before I saw him. It showed up one morning and parked in the middle of the empty lot next door, engine idling like it was considering a bad decision. A few days later, there was a trailer. Then came the wood, the workers, the porta-potty. All of it moved in like it had been invited. Only no one had told me. I didn't think much of it at first. People build. This was Colorado. That's what people do when they get bored of cities and want clean air and connection to the earth, until winter hits and they remember DoorDash doesn't deliver to dirt roads. Richard introduced himself once, very briefly. Middle-aged, maybe early 60s, leathery face like a retired insurance agent, and a look in his eyes like he was permanently annoyed someone else was breathing near him. He told me he bought the land in a quiet deal, and that boundaries would be finalized later. I remember blinking at that. "You mean the survey?" I asked. Yeah, that. Then he walked off. We never shook hands. The thing is, the lot he bought was notoriously a mess in the county records. It had been passed around like a cursed heirloom. Misfiled surveys, confused zoning notes, and one case where a geodetic map from the 1970s listed it as potential floodplain. But I didn't worry. My land was clean. I paid extra for that clean title, had a professional survey team walk it twice. My house sat well within the boundaries, and I had the signed diagrams to back it up. Richard's build went up fast, suspiciously fast. There were no public notices, no visible permits, and the framing was already done before the county even updated the lot status on their website. I kept to myself, watched from a distance. He never asked to check property lines or coordinate utilities. He just hammered away like a man trying to finish something before someone told him to stop. It didn't take long before he started complaining. First it was my fence, too tall, obstructing the view. Then my wind chimes, unsettling the wildlife. Then my driveway. Too noisy when you back out. I tried being civil. Offered coffee once. He declined. Just stared at the steam like it offended him. I'd dealt with difficult people before. Hell, I've worked with developers. But something about Richard was different. He was the kind of man who always seemed to carry invisible paperwork. A list of grievances, rehearsed arguments, and just enough legal-sounding jargon to confuse the average person into submission. And then came the first sign something was off. I was walking the edge of my property one evening, checking my solar panels after a storm, when I noticed one of my old iron corner stakes, the ones driven in during the original survey, was missing. Not fell over or rusted away. Gone, uprooted. Like someone wanted to erase a line in the dirt and pretend it was never there. I replaced it quietly. Drove in a new one. Marked it with GPS this time. I didn't say a word, but I knew. Something was coming. I was in the middle of trimming some brush along the south fence line when I heard gravel crunching under heavy boots. I turned around just in time to see Richard marching toward me, like a man who'd just caught someone stealing from his grandmother's purse. He was gripping a manila folder in one hand, like it contained state secrets, and righteous fury. "You think you're slick, huh?" he barked before I even had a chance to open my mouth. I wiped sweat from my brow with my forearm. "Morning, Richard. You doing okay?" He ignored that completely. "I've had enough of your crap. Your house is on my land, and I have proof." I stared at him, genuinely caught off guard. "Wait, what?" He thrust the folder toward me. Inside were several badly printed satellite images, some hand-drawn diagrams that looked like a toddler got loose with a ruler, and a couple of survey summaries that were unsigned and had no county stamp. At the top of one of the pages, I kid you not, was a logo that said Rocky Mountain Land Advisory, and under it, in tiny font, "Not a licensed surveyor." I raised an eyebrow. "Richard, this isn't—" "You have 30 days, he interrupted, voice sharp and certain, "to remove your house, or I will take this to court, and you'll regret ever ignoring property lines." I closed the folder slowly and handed it back to him like it was radioactive. "You're joking." "Does this look like a joke?" he snapped. It didn't. The man was deadly serious. Face flushed, lip trembling, eyes wide with whatever cocktail of righteousness and delusion he'd been drinking that morning. "Look, I've got all my original documents," I said carefully. "County certified. Licensed surveyors. My house is fully on my parcel. You're mistaken." "Mistaken?" he laughed, the sound sharp and weirdly unhinged. "I hired an expert. I paid good money for this. You think I'd come here if I wasn't sure? You think I don't see what you're doing? You've been encroaching since day one." I blinked. "Richard, I haven't moved a thing since I built it." He pointed a trembling finger toward the northeast corner of my house. "That gutter. That gutter alone is 6 feet into my lot. And your AC unit? Over the line. You've been stealing my land 1 inch at a time, and I won't stand for it." That was the moment I realized. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a siege. And he was already living in a version of reality that only made sense if you ignored the facts and replaced them with paranoia and printer ink. "I'll have my attorney reach out," I said, trying to end it before it spiraled. "I'll be expecting demolition notices," he snarled. "Don't think you're untouchable just because you think you're smarter than everyone." He turned and stormed off, muttering something about restitution and precedent as he went. The next few days were weird. First, I noticed a handful of cars slowing down as they passed my driveway. Not tourists. These were the kind of cars locals drive. Beat-up trucks, SUVs with dog hair on the seats, a Subaru with an HOA sticker on the rear window. People were watching. Then came the whispers. A neighbor down the road, Marcy, stopped me while I was picking up mail. "Hey, I don't mean to pry," she said gently, "but Richard's been saying your whole house is illegal? That you knew it all along and just hoped no one would notice?" I actually laughed. "That's news to me." "Well," she added, "he's been telling people he might have to take drastic action. Thought you should know." And just like that, I realized he was laying the groundwork. Not just for a legal claim, but for a reputation hit. I was being painted as some kind of architectural squatter, a land-grabbing snake who thought he could outsmart the system and steal a slice of the mountain from the poor, victimized man next door. I pulled out all my documents that night: the original survey, the certified plat map, the boundary confirmation letters from the county. I went through every line, every measurement, every lot number. It was all there, ironclad and clear. And yet, I felt it. The thing you feel when someone starts rewriting a story around you. Doesn't matter how solid your version is, if they shout theirs louder and longer. The next morning, I went to the local records office. I didn't want assumptions. I wanted everything double-checked. I pulled my land's history, confirmed the parcel numbers, reconfirmed the boundary registration. I even called the surveyor from 5 years ago and got lucky. He was still working, still had the files, and still remembered the job. "Ellis, right?" he said. "Oh yeah, I remember you. You were the guy who actually walked the land with us. Not many do that. Do you remember if there was ever a dispute on the North Line?" "Hell no. That line was clean as glass. You had a boulder there we triangulated off. We nailed it." I thanked him and hung up. That boulder was still there. I walked out and looked at it, half buried in dirt and dry grass, scarred from decades of weather. Solid. Permanent. Unlike my neighbor's grip on reality. It didn't take me long to decide. If Richard wanted to escalate this into legal territory, I'd meet him there. But with facts, not fantasy. That same afternoon, I called a licensed surveyor, not just any guy with a truck and a measuring tape. I called Raymond Vogel, a second-generation land surveyor with a reputation for being brutally thorough and allergic to bullshit. "Full resurvey?" he asked over the phone. "Boundaries, elevation, easement overlays?" "The works," I said, "and I want it notarized and ready to drop on a courtroom bench." He laughed. "Someone poked the bear, huh?" "Someone accused me of building my house on his land and gave me 30 days to tear it down." There was a pause. Then, "We'll start tomorrow." 10 days. That's how long it took Raymond's crew to do the job. They showed up with GPS gear, tripods, drones, tablets, and more fluorescent flags than a construction site on acid. They remeasured everything, not just my parcel, but the full stretch that included Richard's lot, and the land on either side. I watched them work like a man watching heart surgery, curious, nervous, and trying not to interfere. Raymond himself came out on day 4, squatted by the southeast corner of my fence, stared at the soil for a long moment, then muttered, "Huh." "What kind of huh is that?" I asked. "The kind that means we're finding surprises." He didn't say more until the full report was ready. I met him in my kitchen. He laid out the documents across my dining table like a blackjack dealer and pointed to a shaded overlay on the map. My house was exactly where it should be. Not 1 inch over. In fact, it was centered so precisely on my parcel, it could have been aligned by a satellite. Then he pointed at the neighbor's house. "This," he said, tapping the outline of Richard's structure, "is where things get spicy." According to the survey, Richard's house was over the boundary. Not a few inches, not a fence line. A full 26 feet of his home, including his wooden deck, part of his living room, and a detached tool shed, were sitting firmly on my property. I blinked. "You're serious?" He nodded, then flipped to the next page. This isn't just a bad assumption. He filed permit paperwork with the county based on old, unofficial parcel data. See here? He cited a 1999 private plat. Not county recognized, not part of the master cadastral system. He told the department that boundaries would be updated post-construction, which is a legal impossibility unless the parcels are merged or one owner sells the other land. He falsified information. That's fraud. I sat back in my chair, stunned. It wasn't just delusion anymore. It was criminal. "He's been living in part of my land," I muttered. "Yep, for over 3 years, by the look of it." Raymond handed me a folder, the official report, signed, notarized, GPS certified. It was the architectural equivalent of a nuclear warhead. If Richard thought his printout from Rocky Mountain Land Advisory was going to hold up, this would eat it alive in court. That night, I pulled up all my correspondence from the past 5 years. I found every inspection notice, zoning approval, and construction confirmation I'd received when I was building. I lined them up with the new survey. They matched perfectly. Out of pure curiosity, and maybe a hint of spite, I also dug into the county permit database. It was public, searchable by applicant name. I found Richard's application from 3 years ago. The attached plot map looked like it was scanned from a napkin. The coordinates were way off, and more importantly, the name of the surveyor? Internal Mapping, RM Division. Not licensed, no registration, no certification number. I bookmarked the file, took screenshots, and sent everything to my lawyer. Then I did something petty, but necessary. I went out and drove a fresh metal stake right into the property line. The real one. Right where Raymond marked it. And I installed a little solar-powered trail cam, disguised as a moisture sensor. I had a feeling my neighbor might not like what he was about to find out. And right on cue, 2 nights later, he did. I woke up to the soft chime of a notification on my phone. The camera had detected movement at 2:43 in the morning. I opened the feed. There he was, Richard, in sweatpants and a hoodie, holding a flashlight in one hand and a crowbar in the other, standing over the new stake like it owed him rent. He yanked it out with a grunt, tossed it into the woods, then stood over the spot for a long time, talking into his phone. The audio was grainy, but I could make out one sentence loud and clear. "If this guy doesn't move his damn house, I'll tear the whole thing down myself." I swear to God I smiled, paused the video, and saved it in 3 different folders: local, cloud, and encrypted backup. Now I had everything I needed. By the next morning, I had 2 things: a time-stamped video of my neighbor committing vandalism and threatening property destruction, and a migraine the size of Boulder. I didn't know whether to laugh or go straight to the sheriff. But first, I needed to play this smart. Richard was clearly escalating, and if there's one thing you don't do when dealing with a lunatic, it's blink first. So I called my attorney, Beth. Beth is the kind of woman who could draft a cease and desist in under an hour and still have time to ruin someone's afternoon with a well-placed subpoena. I sent her the survey results, the permit screenshots, and, of course, the 2:43 a.m. creeper footage. "This is solid," she said. "More than solid. But you know what would make it bulletproof?" "What?" "A pattern. If he's done this before, we can frame this as deliberate. Fraud with intent. You ever look into his history?" I hadn't. Until that moment, Richard Miller had just been an unpleasant neighbor with a God complex and a really bad sense of personal space. But now that she mentioned it, something had always felt rehearsed about the way he handled things, like he was performing a role he'd played before. So I did what every modern man does when seeking the truth. I Googled him. I started with property records. Turns out Richard Miller had owned a home in Utah just 5 years before coming here. A little deeper digging revealed that it was in a tightly regulated HOA community outside Salt Lake City. Then came the breadcrumbs, a forum thread on a neighborhood complaints board, dated 4 years ago. The title? Ex-HOA President Mueller sued for land dispute and harassment. I clicked it so fast, I nearly broke my mouse. Dozens of comments. People accusing him of boundary harassment, false reports to the county, and, I kid you not, removing a property marker with a crowbar. The parallels were so eerie I had to read it twice, just to make sure it wasn't some elaborate satire. He'd apparently tried to enforce HOA rules beyond his authority, declared a neighbor's garden encroaching, and filed a fraudulent complaint claiming her shed was on communal land. The case had gone to small claims court, where he lost badly. Then he sold his house, left the state, and dropped off the digital map. Until now. He even changed the spelling of his name. In the Utah court docket, it was listed as Richard Richter Mueller. Here, just Mueller. I sat back in my chair, a cold chill crawling down my spine. This wasn't just some overzealous old man with a grudge. This was a repeat offender, a serial boundary pusher, and I had him on camera doing it again. I sent everything to Beth. The forum thread, the court summary, the archived images. Her reply was instant. Holy hell, we just got ourselves a loaded gun. I'm drafting the formal claim now. Also, install more cameras. So I did. 4 more, actually. One hidden in the birdhouse near the north line, one disguised as a sprinkler head near the back fence, one under the porch eave with infrared, and one, my favorite, in a decorative lawn owl I'd been gifted by my aunt and never had the heart to throw away. Then I printed out the survey results, laminated them, and nailed them to a wooden post right where the stake had been ripped out. I added a copy of the county plat and a note in large block letters. Any attempt to remove this marker will be considered criminal trespass. That night, Richard didn't come out, but the next morning I caught him staring. He was standing on his deck, arms crossed, face tight, like he knew something was slipping through his fingers but couldn't admit it out loud. I almost waved. Almost. The final straw came 2 days later, when I spotted a car I didn't recognize parked at the far edge of my property. I walked up cautiously and found a man in khakis and a button-up shirt photographing my house. I asked who he was. He said he was an independent assessor, hired to document visual encroachments for a private client. He didn't say who, but I didn't need to guess. Beth filed the lawsuit that afternoon. Formal allegations, unlawful encroachment, fraudulent permitting, destruction of property, and willful harassment. And we attached the cherry on top, the nighttime video of Richard digging up the stake and threatening to destroy my house. That, Beth said, was the kind of thing judges love. Now it was official. The game wasn't just on, it had gone nuclear. Court hearings are not like TV. There's no dramatic soundtrack, no grand declarations, no perfectly timed gasps from the gallery. It's mostly dull carpeting, worn wood, and people mumbling over paper. But when Richard walked into the courtroom flanked by 2 men in matching navy blazers, carrying an oversized tube of technical documents, I realized he was about to try and make it theatrical anyway. Beth leaned over and whispered, "Let me guess. His expert witnesses." The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Ramirez, called the session to order. Our case was first on the docket, and frankly, we were all ready to get this circus started. Beth opened with our statement that Richard had illegally constructed portions of his house, including structural elements, on my legally owned parcel of land, and that his permits were based on fabricated coordinates. We submitted the GPS-verified survey, the permit records, and, of course, the late-night stake removal video. Judge Ramirez raised an eyebrow at that last one. "Do you have a copy for the court?" "Oh, yes," Beth said with a smile, sliding over a flash drive. Time-stamped and geotagged. Then it was Richard's turn. He stood like he was preparing to argue a murder charge. "Your Honor," he began, "this entire complaint is based on manipulated data, biased interpretation, and an attempt to smear my reputation." "Proceed," the judge said flatly. "My home is not in violation of any boundary," he declared, "and I have professionals here to verify that." He gestured dramatically to the 2 men seated behind him. The first, a wiry guy with greasy hair and a briefcase that looked like it hadn't been opened since the Reagan administration, took the stand. He introduced himself as a survey advisor and real estate boundary consultant. Beth asked, "Are you a licensed surveyor in the state of Colorado?" "No, but I have over 20 years of experience." "Are you certified by any professional geodetic organization?" "Not currently, but I've consulted on several." So, you are not qualified to submit legally binding survey documents? He hesitated. Not legally, no. Beth turned to the judge. Move to strike the witness's testimony as inadmissible. Granted, Ramirez said, scribbling something without looking up. Richard's jaw clenched. His second expert didn't fare much better. The guy wore a golf shirt and khakis and introduced himself as a logistics analyst. Beth asked him one question. Are you affiliated in any way with Mr. Mueller outside of this hearing? The man hesitated, then admitted, I handle payroll for Mr. Mueller's private consulting firm. So, you're his accountant? Technically, the judge actually pinched the bridge of her nose. Mr. Mueller, she said, do you have any witnesses with actual land surveying credentials? I have data, he insisted, and I have reason to believe Mr. Ellis's survey was manipulated. Beth stood again. Your Honor, we have not only a licensed surveyor's report, but drone footage, cadastral overlays, GPS logs, and video evidence of Mr. Mueller removing a boundary marker and threatening to destroy Mr. Ellis's home. Judge Ramirez looked at Richard. Did you remove a boundary stake, Mr. Mueller? I was correcting a fraudulent installation, he said firmly. Did you say you would destroy the plaintiff's house? I was speaking metaphorically. I see. She gestured for the clerk to play the video. There was a beat of silence as the footage played. The room watched Richard, in night vision green, ripping the stake out with a crowbar and muttering threats into the dark. The audio was muffled, but crystal clear. If this guy doesn't move his damn house, I'll tear the whole thing down myself. I swear to God, when it ended, no one said anything. Then Judge Ramirez leaned back and said, Mr. Mueller, I'm advising you to retain actual legal counsel. I am representing myself, he snapped. Beth raised an eyebrow. Of course you are. It only got worse for him after that. The county inspector we'd subpoenaed confirmed that the permits Richard submitted were not only based on obsolete data, but lacked proper parcel ID numbers. They should have never been approved, he said under oath. If this had come across my desk, I would have flagged it instantly. Richard, meanwhile, fumed silently, shuffling his stack of useless diagrams like a man trying to summon reality through printer paper. As we were leaving the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered near the steps. Someone must have tipped off the local news, or maybe word had spread after Beth quietly forwarded the video to a real estate watchdog blog. A reporter tried to ask Richard a question, but he pushed past without speaking. I noticed one guy in the crowd wearing a T-shirt that read, My fence, my kingdom. Beth saw it too and grinned. Looks like your story's getting legs. And for the first time in weeks, I actually felt it. Not just vindication, momentum. The final ruling came on a Tuesday. It was one of those crisp Colorado mornings where the sky looks like it's been photoshopped. I stood outside the courthouse with Beth, coffee in hand, trying to pretend I wasn't vibrating like a live wire. Across the lot, Richard sat in his truck, alone, motionless, like a man about to lose a bet he swore was rigged in his favor. Inside, Judge Ramirez wasted no time. I've reviewed the documentation, heard the testimony, and examined the evidence presented by both parties, she began, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a scalpel. This is not a matter of a simple boundary dispute. This is a case of deliberate misrepresentation, illegal construction, and malicious harassment. Richard looked like someone had hit him in the stomach with a shovel. The judge continued, now reading from the bench with growing sharpness. The defendant, Mr. Mueller, submitted falsified permit applications, built a residential structure on land that was not legally his, and then attempted to reverse the truth using unlicensed testimony and intimidation tactics. The video evidence and survey materials provided by Mr. Ellis and his counsel leave no room for ambiguity. Then came the hammer. This court finds the defendant guilty of property encroachment, fraudulent permitting, destruction of marked boundaries, and making threats of property damage. In addition, the court refers the matter of the falsified permit and related documents to the district attorney for consideration of criminal charges relating to document fraud. Beth and I locked eyes. Oh, it was worse for Richard than we even hoped. The defendant is sentenced to 12 months in county jail for falsification of legal documents, suspended pending 3 years of supervised probation. Additionally, he is fined $180,000 in civil damages for illegal use of Mr. Ellis's land, punitive compensation for harassment, and legal fees. But it didn't stop there. The court further orders the immediate demolition and removal of all portions of the defendant's structure which encroach upon Mr. Ellis's property. Said demolition must occur within 90 days to be executed at the defendant's expense, and all restorative landscaping to be approved by the plaintiff's legal counsel. Richard stood. This is outrageous. That man manipulated the system. Judge Ramirez banged the gavel once, firmly. Mr. Mueller, another outburst, and I will hold you in contempt. You should consider yourself lucky this court has opted for partial incarceration. You've spent the last 3 years living on stolen ground. Security was already moving toward him when he sat back down, face red and jaw trembling. 3 days later, a demolition crew showed up at Richard's house. I watched from my front porch as they marked off the 26 feet of illegal structure. His deck was the first to go. Wood ripped up like paper, nails screeching as they were torn loose. Then came part of the living room wall, a section of siding, and his detached shed, which, ironically, fell over under its own weight when the excavator nudged it. The crew worked fast. It was as if they'd been waiting to do this all week. Richard wasn't around to watch it happen. Word was he'd checked into a motel 30 miles out of town. The local paper ran a piece on it. Architect wins landmark property case. Neighbor ordered to demolish house segment. The article included a blurry still from the night vision video. The comment section was brutal. I thought that would be the end of it. But fate wasn't done with Richard yet. Turns out he'd mortgaged his house to fund his legal efforts, and with the demolition, its value tanked. Within a month, the bank filed foreclosure. They put the entire property up for auction. Beth flagged the listing the moment it went public. "Want to own a little poetic justice?" she asked. I did. The auction was a formality. No one wanted a half-gutted house with a criminal record attached to it. I put in a bid that was about the price of a decent pickup truck. It was accepted without hesitation. And just like that, I owned the land he once stole from me, and the house he built partially on it. There was a strange satisfaction in it, like turning the last page of a long, twisted book and realizing the ending made more sense than you thought. The first thing I did was repaint the property line markers. Then I put up new lights, solar-powered, motion-activated. They turned on every time someone stepped within 5 feet of the true boundary. No one had stepped past since. A year later, you could still see the scar in the dirt where Richard's deck used to be. Grass had started reclaiming the space, wildflowers poking through what was once the edge of his illegal living room. The rest of his house stood awkwardly trimmed, like someone had taken a bite out of it and forgotten to chew. I let it sit that way for a while, mostly out of principle. Eventually, I paid a crew to finish clearing it, level the intrusion, flatten the soil, put it all back the way it should have been before he decided boundaries were optional. Then I did something petty, something perfect. I built a platform, just a small wooden deck, 10 by 10 feet, exactly where his trespassing deck had once stood. On it, I installed a single Adirondack chair and a sun umbrella. In front of that, I mounted a thick wooden post with a metal sign bolted to it. Engraved in black lettering, it read, "This is what happens when you lie about boundaries. Property owner, G. Ellis." The first day it went up, I thought maybe a few people would notice. Maybe someone would shake their head and think, "Yeah, that guy got what he deserved." But I underestimated the internet. Someone took a photo, probably one of the hikers who wandered down the trail behind my lot, and posted it online. Within a week, it went viral. First it hit Reddit, r/malicious compliance, then r/legal advice, and finally r/petty revenge. By the time it hit Twitter, people were calling it the Ellis line. And it didn't stop there. Neighbors started putting up their own signs, subtle at first, then less so. Mapped, measured, lawyer-proof. Respect the line or find the fine. One guy down the road, Fred, retired Navy, stuck a placard in his flower bed that read, "Number Ellis Line Challenge. Come try me, HOA." Turns out, people were hungry for a good boundary story. They'd all had their own Richard at some point. The lawn-measuring neighbor, the fence mover, the HOA enforcer with a clipboard, and an ego. My story? It became a symbol, not just of property rights, but of fighting back with facts instead of fury. Even the county got in on it. I was invited to speak briefly at a zoning committee workshop. They wanted to show my case as a textbook example of why digital cadastral systems matter. I gave a 5-minute talk. People clapped. Someone offered me pie. Richard? No one had seen him since the auction. Rumor was he'd tried to settle somewhere in Arizona. Maybe he'd go for a third identity this time. Richter? Mueller? Maybe next it'd be R. McBoundary. Who knows? I don't think about him much anymore, but sometimes, when I sit in that Adirondack chair on the platform he built on the land he tried to steal, I smile. Not because I won, but because he thought he could rewrite reality with a crooked map and a straight face. He forgot one thing. Property lines don't care how loudly you argue. They care where the pins go.